This video is to demonstrate the new models I've made for point levers, rodding, cranks, that sort of thing, and signal wire. So first of all, I'm in Surveyor in Trainz, and I'm going to create a route. So here we go, and it's going to be Imperial. And I'm going to be using this track, 60-foot flat bottom BR1 standard. That's the one I tend to default to. So let's make some of that first of all. And I'm going to make a simple junction. Just bring in another spline, and there we are. And we've got junction number 0, and I want to straighten the foot of the junction so as to make sure it's okay. And what I've done is I've produced some models which will replace the junction lever that we've got here, and will also provide some scenery items, although they're track objects, to give the appearance of the point rodding and cranking that was prevalent. My source materials are multi-volume set about railways dating from 1913. So this is what I've taken as my guide, and I've made a number of items which I'm going to explain in this video. So first of all, I want to find my point lever. Now this is facing track as far as I'm concerned, driving on the left hand side. There's going to be another track to the right here, and I'll alter the junction when I come to that, which will be the trailing track. So left hand drive, so UK standard. And so it's a point lever for the facing track. This is the one I'm going to use. So first of all, I'm going to delete the existing track lever, and I'm going to replace it with my own. And I'm putting it quite a way down the junction, as you can see here, because I've found that if you put it right onto the junction, sometimes it will take the geometry of the turnout track, and sometimes with the straight track. So I put it down there, and then I move it up, and you can see here, look, it's going around there, so we don't want that. So I want to be very careful and try and position it. Usually I position it so that it's about the locking bar, which is non-animated, but this is the locking bar here, is just next to the end of the point blade. So I'll aim to move that along. Move it back, here we go, come on. Should move up a bit more. I do have issues with the way in which these move, but as track objects, I think I want to go one more. Well, we'll leave it there. Yeah, that's about as close as I would want to. Also, you can see there's a slight, it is on the geometry of the turnout track, but nevertheless it's still okay. And you can see here that it comprises of some pale grey bars for moving the points blades, and this is actually the locking bar here. And although I've animated it, normally there will be 2 point rods, one to activate this crank and one to activate this crank, but I've simplified it just down to 1 because we're getting to the point where it's rivet counting, and you've got to draw the line somewhere. So now I'm just going to change the position of the junction, the setting for the junction. There we are, and you can see here the cranks move and the bars move. Okay, so my next thing is that I want to bring in another length of track. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'll see if I can do this. I think you can. I'm going to move this turnout over to here, over to the left hand side. Let's see how we get on. Oh, we've managed to do it. There we are. That's the flexibility of Trainz. Excellent. And if we move down here, it's just getting this position of this point lever just right. I just want to pull it back down. Which way am I going? I'm now going on the straight track. That's good. So I reckon it's about the third sleeper along. So if you look at the point blade, there's the end of the point blade, and you can see the pieces which I've done there, and this is the rod, which is where it's actually activated. And so it's overall it's it's sort of centered in that part of the track, and I think we're okay there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a so that's the down line, and we just turn it back so that it's going straight ahead. There we are. And now I'm going to bring in a second track, and I'm holding the shift key down because I don't want it to connect up with this one, and I'll just lay that there, and then I'll bring it over, move it over, again holding the shift key down to stop any splines joining up. And note that I've turned the rotation of these spline points off because I found it was a bit too distracting. And there we are. I've sort of estimated the distance it should be. It's clearly not right. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to fix the track width. So let's go up to this end, and I've made my own track ruler based upon an inspiring track ruler that's on the DLS, but I wanted to add a few details, so I've made my own. And let's have a quick look at that. So this track ruler is set to the UK standard track measurements. So we've got a 4'8" gauge, obviously, and then here between the outer edge of this rail and the outer edge of this rail we should have 6 feet, and that's what I've marked here. These dark grey lines should be where this track lays on top of the ruler, and it's set far too wide for UK standards. So again, holding the shift key down, I want to move the track spline over, and this ruler is just for use in Surveyor. So there we are, and come down to the other end, and I know that when I put another track ruler in here and just turn it round, there we are, and I'm going to be aiming to do this all on every bit of track on my new demonstration route of St Twinels. Sorry, I've left that on as a should be there, moving, not adding. So here we go. I'm holding the shift key down and I'm bringing that over, looking straight down. There we are, and our line of sight is adequate, I've found, to create the correct distance. Previously I would have used I think they're AJS track spacers, but I prefer doing it this way now. And what I've done on this is also I've added pale grey lines there, and there's one over there, and what these are for, this is the line for the platform edge if you put any platform there, and the same there if it's single track. So it would be there and there for single track, or there and there for double track. Okay, so we've got double track, and so the next thing for me to do to demonstrate my point levers is to bring in another junction. There we are, and I want to straighten that track so we get a proper junction. And also what I want to do is just move that spline point, carefully holding so that I'm as close to the other as possible. And maybe I'll also put in a track ruler on this one, and turn it round, and you can see there that I've drifted away from the correct width. It's too far over. So again, bring my track spline, oops, there we are. So now one thing I've noticed is that even though I've laid the same sort of track and we've got the same spline points in the track, sleepers don't marry up, and that's because, as far as I can see, the geometry which dictates how the track appears, there's so many variables or so much different with it. If we look on there, look, the track spline could really do with coming down a tiny amount more. Can I line up the sleepers? Well, yeah, if I'm very, very careful. I think we're there. Does that mean that the point blades are in the same position? Well, no, I don't think they are. Or are they? Looking there. Yeah, maybe they are. Maybe they are. And let's just check again. Let's put that ruler back. Just to make sure I've got the position right. So you have to become your own engineer, and you know, I really like doing track in Trainz, and I've been frustrated by some of the issues over the years, and I decided not to accept them anymore, and I'm going to take my time and do it correctly. There we are. We'll just delete that ruler. Oops, wrong one. That's the one we want. Okay, and now I can show you the my trailing point lever. So first of all, I delete the default one that comes as soon as you, and then I'm going to bring it in. Whoops, still on the track ruler. Where we are. Point lever trailing, that's what we want. Thank you very much. There we are, and we bring it in there, and now, as with this one, I'm going to try and move it into position. Try and get it in more or less the same position as the other one. Same position on the track. What I've also noticed is that track objects don't smoothly run along the track. When you're positioning them, they seem to jump along at some sort of strange preset amounts, which I reckon seems to be about, I don't know, 50 centimeters, maybe 40 centimeters, or just under, maybe even as low as a foot. It's about 30 centimeters. So there we are. So that looks all okay. We've got our point levers in place, and we know that they work. So that's fine. Okay, very straightforward. But we want to add some detail. Well, let's put a signal box in. Now, I have been experimenting with making a signal box as a track item, and I was tempted to do that, but after experimenting, I've decided not to go ahead with that. So I'm using Borton on the Water signal box, one of my models, and we just bring that in, and it just happens to be already parallel with the track. That's fine. The reason why I was experimenting with it as a track, turn it round of course, as a track object, was so that it would always be parallel with the track, but then the distance between the track and the signal boxes varies considerably. So I decided, well, we're not, that's not going to be as flexible as it should be. Okay, so we've got a signal box, and let's put in the it's essentially a walkway signal box, I've called it, and it's essentially, well, you'll see what it is. I'll click on there, and it just places a set distance, some boarding, and it's got basically just darkness underneath it. And but it's set. I may increase the width of this and perhaps even the length, and maybe do a smaller one as well. But now we just move our signal box up to it, if it will let me. Come on, here we go. And all you need to do is butt it up against it there. So because I'm not going to model all the intricacies of the point cranks, rodding cranks, and let's just slide that along a little bit as they exit the all of the interlocking under the in the basement, in the ground floor of the signal box. So there's a signal box, and there's my signalman, and he's got his set of levers, and he's got a fire lit. That's nice, as you would expect. Okay, so now we want to control 2 points. So we go back to, or now we go into splines, and I've got splines here which are 2 rods. There's a single rod spline, and it goes right up to 8 rod spline. Now these I did issue before, but I've changed them. These are now version 2, KUID 2s, and the reason for that is that now I've realigned where the, as you can see here, it's offset. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8 rods, but the center point, there you can see it's slightly moved to the side. In fact, what it is now, instead of being centered between the 4th and 5th rod, so that the next extension would fit on there, it's now centered on this, the 2nd rod. Now why would that be? Well, it's because what I want to do is to be able to connect other rods to it. For example, oh sorry, it's on the other side. It's here. That's the one that it's centered on now, and that gives you that means that instead of all 8 rods going forward, there's now 2 rods going forward and 6 rods which have stopped for some reason. So that's not quite the situation as it is here, because what we got here are 2-point levers, and maybe we'll imagine there's a points further on. So first of all, let me delete those, and what I want is a 3-point rodding. There we go, and that's okay because it didn't need this one. The number 3 or 3-point rods don't need any didn't need any change, because the center line there is actually the middle rod. That's the only one. That and the single rod spline are the only ones that didn't need to be altered. So I'm going to move that more or less into position. You can see already we're beginning to fill up with these spline points, and they can prove to be a real bugbear when you're trying to work out what goes where, and even to see them. So I just tuck that under there. So there we are. I basically hidden away the end of the point rods, and we got 3. Now one of these is going to be for this point, and one is going to be for this point, and one is going to carry on for some other point somewhere else. So I'm just going to move that back a tad. Once we have the 2 point levers in place, now I want to start preparing to connect up a point rodding spline. I've got the 3 spline one here. So what I've done is made a couple of track objects to basically extend this lever, and of course that lever, along to take it away from this track object and the spline, track spline indicator, point indicator there. So I've made 2 different types. First of all, it's just a length of point rodding with the support. So that's the same, virtually the same as here. And the other one I've made is a compensator, which would be used where expansion of the point rods might be an issue, so this allows for that movement to take place without interrupting the effectiveness of the point rod. So once you click them onto the track, you can just move them along and just, well, they'll slide inside that as well, but just so that they meet. And if you want to have the point compensator, the point rod compensator, you can use that one next as well, but it's not absolutely necessary. I'll just put it in for a bit of variety. And so what I'll do is I'll put another extension in to make it super easy to connect up the spline when we get there. And now what we can do is just connect the spline up to the end there, not connect. All you're doing is moving it so that it's in the same position. There's no connecting point on any of these. These track objects just don't allow for a connecting point, unfortunately. Otherwise I would certainly have done that. So if anybody knows any way that I can do that, I'd be very grateful to know. So here we are with our spline of 3 point rods. So that's all very well. That's going to be able to connect into that, butt up against that. But what about the other point? Well, what I've done there is you would normally take the point rodding across the track and then have another bit of point rodding to connect it up. So sure enough, I've made something for that. In fact, it's quite a you'll see here I've got point rod crank, I've called it, and then there's 3 different types, there's 3 different flavors. So I'm just going to show you those before I actually fit one. Now they're all track objects. So first of all, and this one is for double track. So if I click on that, you can see that it's crossing over the 2 tracks and it's giving me the 2 ends of the point rod. Now this is a non-animated mesh. It's to give the impression, but I think it's worth adding because it just adds to the detail of your track. And let's just rotate that a minute. And I then, because I'll need to move it over to this track. There we are. So if I needed to have it that way, and if we look down on it, you'll see that it's slightly over. It doesn't meet up with this, and it's designed to be like that. Doesn't meet up with that there, because what we're going to do is going to put a bit of spline in to connect it up. Also, if we look down onto it, you'll see that it's got a swan neck at each end of the crank, and the reason for that is so it can run underneath the point rodding that's coming out from the signal box. So if I show you here, look, we just move that spline and it sits over the top. Okay, but what you will see is that the swan neck there brings it up to the level of that point rodding, but the crank itself sits below. So let's move that spline back again out of the way. And it really helps not having these wretched rotating spline points, and we'll just turn that round again. Actually, it's not one that what we want is one that is going this way here, but one that's going that way there, and I have allowed for that. So if we delete that, just go back up here and you'll see left to right and right to left, and I think the one we want is right to left. That's it, look. So then that gives us a point rod going across, and we can connect it up to there using our bits and pieces. So let's move that. I tend to like to keep these a little bit back from the down line here, just so as to make life a little bit easier for, well, that's assuming I can move it. There we are. So if I take it back to about there, and then so now it's obvious that what's going to happen is that this 3 rod spline, has got to come up to here to connect up with that, and then we need a 2-rod spline to go to this point and to maybe another point further on. So let's go point rodding 2 and just put a bit there just to make it easier for us. And it's beginning to get a bit like the Olympic rings, but I hope it will become clear. And I clicked on there. Now it's occupying the innermost and the middle rod, so that's not what we want. And it's because these are handed. They're left-handed or right-handed. But you'll soon understand what I mean when I turn it round and I take this, and it should click up to the, there we are, and it's made that connection. And that's because now it is no longer a spline which is centered on the rods, and we just move that one up to there. I know it seems fiddly, but it's worth doing because you do get the good effect from it. And if we just dip under these rings, then you'll get an idea of what I've done. And you can see there we've got the middle of these 3 rods cranking this point lever. We've got the innermost one connected up, or apparently connected up, to our cross track crank here. And then all we do over here is we can either put in just a single point rod without any of these extra bits, or you can put that where are we, the extension, point rod extension, or we could put a point rod extension in here. Just flick it over. Don't you love Trainz? There we are, flick it over, and then we'll move it over to here. There it is, butting into our point lever. And then we can take a spline. I've tried to reduce as much as possible the use of splines because of these great big white circles around the ends. And it'd be rather nice if we could just have them as a dot or something, but no way. And I'm going to go vertical now to make sure. Let's just twist that round a bit, and you'll see here now that all I'm doing is making sure, and in fact you can overrun it, it won't make any big difference. But now we've got our point rod has come under the track and connected up to the trailing line point lever, and I think that looks a lot more prototypical. That's my feeling. Hang on, it's going all over the place here. Let's try and dip down. It's the shift key I've got to hold down on them, not the control key. So let's take it down, and to me that looks much more like, you know, the old 1913 style kit for running, changing the points. So what I've done is, rather than have, normally there would be a point rod for actuating the point blades, and then a second point rod which would actuate the locking bar. But that was just making life far too complicated. I mean, you see it already looks like some sort of desperate, I don't know. But it means we've got a 2-rod spline here, 3-rod spline back to the signal box. So here we are trying to get our single point rod now, and because the 2-rod bit of spline had its connector on this inner rod to connect with the middle rod of the 3 rods there, then we can't just click this against the into the second, because it will jump and it'll sort of overlay this rod here. So what we do is we don't allow it to connect, but we do position it using our shift key to hold it down and to butt it up against there. And we want to be a bit cautious about how close we come to the fittings of the point lever. Again, this is all pretty much prototypical. I've been looking at all sorts of bits and pieces to see how these point rods work. So I'm going to bring that in quite close. And now what we can do is, if this is going to be a point off of this turnout that is going to be controlled by this single line, then we can bring in another length of the single, just connect it up, there we are, and curve it round. Again, prototypical, that's okay. And if we want, we could put more spline points in to bend it a little bit more, but I wouldn't get too crazy. But the important thing is that we've successfully got a, just bring that down under, so we're looking underneath, peeking underneath those rotating circles, and we've got a situation where we've got our point lever in place, we've got the correct point rodding, one of which is heading over the track to the other side, one is connecting up to our point rod. Let's just creep forward a bit. Yeah, it's a bit too close there, so we'll need to pull that back a bit, but it's not difficult to adjust. Where are we? So we keep our shift key down. That's the wrong one, we don't want to change that one. As I say, it's a bit fiddly when you first get into it, but it does get easier. What I'll do is I'll delete this, okay, and then I'll redo it from above. I'll connect onto there, bring it over here, and then come down, make sure I'm vertical, just nudge down a little bit more. That wretched white is bleaching out what I want to see. So now shift key down, I'm moving that single rod so it's precisely positioned. I hope that's right. And now come down, and that's better. What's causing the problem there is the curve. So what I should do is move, I think it's that one. Yes, I'll bring that out just a little bit there, just to give it, so it doesn't bind up against that. But frankly, for the amount of time it takes just to do this, I think for the effect, it's well worth it. That's why I've made these. This is what I wanted for my St. Twinnells and for my own other routes. And it means you have to take a bit of time just laying out the point work and making these connections back to the signal box. And but it pays off because, you know, it looks good. It looks right. Well, I think it does anyway. And so if we come back to our signal box, there we are. And this is a nameable, renamable signal box based on my, well, it's just a copy of the one in that I made for Bourton on the Water. So let's call it Merion Junction signal box. There we are, and there it is. And it's because Merion Junction is the junction, big junction on my St. Twinnells layout. Okay, so we've got some point rodding there. Well, why not do something else as well? So down here I've got some signal wire, and let's assume there's there's actually a branch signal somewhere, I don't know, somewhere about here. So we'll need 2 wire for the 2 arms, for the straight ahead or for the turnout, and this is just a simple spline. And I want to be able to see that. Looks a bit, just make sure I've got that right. There we are. It seems to have compressed the, doesn't look right. Ah, there we are, as we open it out. So, and all I do here is I just stick that under there as well. I'm not going to worry about making cranks and all the rest of it then. And what it's done is it's connected up with the point rodding, so we don't want that. So I should have held the shift key down, which I'll now do. Bring it in there, and there's a couple of signal wires there, look, coming out, and if we have a signal, then we can just run the... Now most of the signals on the DLS don't have any detail in the at the base of the signal. In fact, I'm not gonna... Let's just have a go at a GWR. Well, where are we? That's no good, is it? GWR signal. See if I'll find it. Oop. Signal. Still no. GWR home. Home. There we are. Right hand side bracket. Left branch. What does that look like? Well, let's stick that in and see what happens. Get it over to the correct side. It's the lattice post. I don't really like those. I like the old timber posts. Anyway, not to worry. This is just to demonstrate it. So here we are with our signal wire again, and here it is. Let's just take it along, and well, there's a little bit of something down there. It's actually a name, signal 52. Well, we don't really want that. I think what I'll do is I'll delete that. What's that one? Home and distance. Shunt. GWR home. Gantry. Distant. I thought I had some. Leave a left hand side. Home and distance. Semi-final. I thought there was some other. Well, I must look them up. There's some of my broad gauge ones there. Home left branch, that's that same one, isn't it? Home left branch, let's have a look at that one. Any better? That's the same one again. Anyway, I'm not worried about that. That's not what I'm trying to illustrate here. And all I do is I just carry the wires into the base and think, well, that'll do. But that's quite an easy way of just adding a little bit of signaling wire into the route, and I think it does look attractive. And I've also done a variation on this, so I've done some additional bits to go with the signal wire. And if I go up to here and just type signal wire 1 horizontal. What a name. And I click that in here, and we've suddenly acquired something very odd. So this is my way of spoofing up the look of signal wire going across to the other side. And it's a track object. See if we can move it along a bit. Can always hope. Yeah, there it is. And I'll just pull that signal wire back a bit so that you can see it. And if I tip down, oops, a bit too fast. Let's swing around and have a look. What you've got here, this again is based upon the 1913 book that I was looking at. That spline point is getting in the way, isn't it, of seeing it? So let's move that out the way a bit. That white, really don't like that. And if we go down, have a look, what have we got here? Well, strange looking thing, I know, but it does do the job. This is pretty much prototypical. There's a single horizontal wheel, a single signal wire comes from a little bracket here, and then it turns right and goes into a tube, and the tube would go under the track, and there'd be another one of these. So let's add another one of those, and it'd be over here. Oh no, we're in the wrong we're in the wrong place. Here we are. And we just turn that around. Now I have noticed that it's almost impossible to get some of these track objects to line up. As far as this is concerned, it doesn't really matter because there's no direct connection between the two. but it's visually taking the wire under the track, and you can see that to over there. And then might as well, while we're seeing it from this angle, bring in a single wire spline, and all you do is bring that, oh, that's a double wire, isn't it? So for this one we want a single wire, spread it out to make sure it doesn't turn circles into ovals, which is a rather disconcerting result. And you just position it like that over the, and then take this one and take it up to whatever signal you've got. And again, you can run that around the track. It's connecting up to yet another spline. I really dislike those spline indicators, spline point indicators. And so if we have a close look in at that, zoom in a bit, spin it around, then you can see what's happened is the single wires come from across the track round the horizontal wheel over the roller, and it's now connected up with these vertical rollers, and you just take that to whichever signal you want to connect. Now, none of this is animated or working or functional. They are purely scenery type items, but it's to convey something of the complexity of signaling in the old steam days. So what have we got? We've got that. So let's grab that and we'll just connect it up to that. There, let's zoom overhead, have a quick look down. Now I know the ballast makes it a little bit awkward to see, but what I've done is I've made, you might be able to just make it out, that's where the little roller is. All you do is take this and plonk it on top, and you're close enough then. There we are, look. And I think it gives the effect very well of, now I've only got a single wire coming from there, so what we can do is I've made several of these, 1, 2 and 3 wire, so let's take this one out and we'll pop in a 2 wire somewhere. Is it going to appear? That's the thing. Oh, that's just moving it, isn't it? There we are. We want to actually add it. There we are. And for that we just then need to move it into position. So the end of the, there we go, end of the signal wire, it is at the same height, I've made sure of that. And what happens is, you can see there is those 2 wires actually, I can see they're over on the other side, aren't they? So I might have to rejig that. But you can see there the 2 wires come down, they go vertical around the wheels, and then they splay out horizontal to enter the tube. And then of course they come over here where there should be another 2 wires, not a single wire, coming out. So that's the signal wires. Okay, so the signal wire spline doesn't align with the track object here, where we've got 1 wire ending on the outside, 1 on the inside. So all we need to do is to go into the spline and not delete it. Move it. Go into the spline and position it so that it is in the correct position. And again, although this seems rather fiddly, it only takes a moment, and once you've done one, believe me, you can handle doing lots, and they produce a nice effect. And here I've already moved the single wire over to meet up with the, more or less meet up with the correct one there. So just make sure that that's in position there. I think that's all right. Looks okay. Yep, there you go. And of course, once you're traveling along in the train, it's going to look great. So what else have I done? What else have I made? Well, basically that's it. There isn't a lot more to it. There are a few other bits and pieces that I'm going to show you, but one of the areas was the cranks that cross over the track to take the point rodding over to the other side. So that's those cranks, that crank there. So that's over double track, and there are 3 different versions to cover, I hope, all eventualities. And so I've made that's the doubles there. So I've also made triples and quadruples. So here's for crossing triple track, and you can see there you can get another track in there, and here's the quad for 4 tracks. But again, those tracks have to be measured from the ruler. Use the ruler to get the track widths positions correct. Okay, I don't think there's anything else on that aspect of it, the point rodding. So there are a couple of other bits to go with the point levers, and first and foremost, well, not so much with the point levers themselves. Yes, there's one that goes to the point levers. What am I thinking? And I need to come down to walkway. Here we are. Walkway double track. Walkway over point lever. So it's another track object. Get that in position, and if you wish, you can just move it up and conceal the moving parts, except you won't conceal them completely because you can see them underneath, because I thought it was nice to be able to see them. And so I've made a little narrow walkway there to cover those over, and you can still see some of the animation as the points move. So you can install those over all or some or whatever you want, if you wish. I thought they were quite handy to have. And speaking about walkways, well, of course we've got this walkway in front of the signal box, which is actually being used to conceal the lack of cranks for the point rods and the signal wires going up into the all the interlocking on the lever frame here. And I've also made some walkways. So for example here, walkway single track, there we are. It's just to go over the track, and originally I thought, well, if I just make one and then I can just click another one, put another one onto the track, and then I can just move that so it'll line up. And well, it hasn't quite lined up, and you can see there's some overlap there, and that was what led me to realize that the geometry of these, and certainly the positions of track objects side by side, you can see the sleepers don't line up. Unless if you spend a lot of time to get the sleepers lined up, then you might get these to line up, but I thought, you know, life's too short. So the quickest thing to do is to make a double track walkway. Just turn that round. There we are. And of course then, once I've made a double one, I have to make a triple one. Turn it round. So that will go across 3 tracks, and so it's a similar situation as these here. And then of course we've got a quadruple track walkway, and you can just click these down, and there we are. And actually they work quite well with the next two, or I've deliberately not made them to just line up with that, because so they can be used in all sorts of situations, but they're quite adequate to go next to that boarding walkway in front of the signal box. So I think that is everything. Just want to make doubly sure. Yeah, all that other is much older stuff. Double track over point, lever quad track, signal box at the walkway. That's that one there. Single track and triple track. There we are. And then they're not mine. SF is mine. So there we are. I hope that's a useful video. I know it's quite a long one. Let's put a bit of rolling stock on here. There we go. One of my recent locomotives off here, and it should be around the other way. And there's the tender. There we are. And that will let us have a look in driver, and it'll get rid of all these white circles. So let's have a quick drive. Yes, we'll save it. Thank you very much. Create new session. Yeah, why not? And so we're just waiting for this to load. Here we are, and we're going to free roaming. And so this is what, and we've got the junction indicators. So what can we do there? I think we've got additional tools, high junction overlays. There we are. And so this is what my new pack of point levers, cranks, signal wire, etc. can show. Now obviously it's bringing up the point lever with my mouse there. But this is the outcome of all that model making and angst over getting the position right with Trainz track geometry, which is well, has its moments, let's put it that way. And you can see, I think, that it's beginning to look pretty good. You start adding in platforms and all the rest of it. Now obviously I've left those track rulers in. We'd lose those before we took it. We'd delete those once you've used them. You don't keep them in Surveyor. I mean, you use them in Surveyor and then delete them once you finish. But that is a nice bit of track, I think, and a couple of nice point levers. And if we just, there we are. Well, I'd be quite happy with that. Obviously the signalling isn't lined up or set up or anything like that. That's one of my, let's just say I have a friend that will help me with that. But there we go. So I hope that's going to be of interest to you, and I hope it's a good guide for how to use all these strange little meshes which I've created to produce something which looks a little like, a bit more like, I think, than Trainz at the moment, the sort of point rodding signal wires that operate from the signal boxes. And I was very pleased to watch a cab ride on YouTube recently of a freight train, a limestone train coming out of a quarry in Buxton heading for Manchester, and we got to Great Rocks Junction, which still has all its rodding and semaphores and all the rest of it. It's like a time capsule almost, and I recognized it. I recognized my models were very, very similar to what was still being used at Great Rocks. So there we are. I think that's a great endorsement. So I hope you enjoy using that, and I hope this guide isn't too lengthy and pernickety, but it does leave you with some really nice looking accessories alongside the track.